Good morning, everyone. Buenos días. Y gracias to the band and for singing La Lengua de mi Corazón, the language of my heart, Spanish. You know how it is when, maybe, I don't know, if you go, say, travel to Europe or someplace where they're speaking another language all the time, and then you hear someone who speaks your language, and it just warms your soul, right? And you want to go meet them. That's how I feel every time I hear Spanish. I have three languages I claim. The first is English. When I was little, I learned English. And then about kindergarten, I started learning Spanglish. So I grew up in a town where we spoke Spanglish. So we understood Spanish fully. That's my third language. But some would talk we all talked in Spanglish, but every once in a while we'd go to one language or the other, English or Spanish, and everybody knew what we were doing. And so when I moved away from Nogales, I moved into Oklahoma, and they spoke English different than I did. And I found out I was using like Spanglish sentence structure, which is more like Spanish sentence structure with English words. And it took me about a year to learn how to speak English the way I speak today. I wish you could have heard me then. You would have laughed. But in Nogales, nobody laughed. It was the way we talked. It was a different language that's not claimed by many people, but I claim it now. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful to hear the heart language. Thank you for bringing that to me today. The scripture today, I'm going to focus on this one part where it talks about signs. And I've been thinking a lot about the signs of the times and how often we want to ignore the signs of the times. So I want to give you a little bit of a warning for this message, that it might get gloomy before it gets gospel-y. So gloomy, and then we'll have some gospel message of hope at the end. So just hang with me. If it gets too gloomy, sorry. But in this message, in the scripture, it says that you know how to interpret the appearance of the sky. So we know how to do that here. We know when a monsoon is coming, right? We can look at the sky and say a monsoon is coming tonight. But you cannot interpret the signs of the times. It also says something about Jonah's sign, the sign of Jonah. I'm not going to address that at all today. It's a whole nother topic, but I encourage you to look up what the meaning of that phrase is. But I'm going to slog through some really difficult signs for us to look at today, because they're signs that are in our face. But so just come with me. Just be open. It's okay. I'll get us out of here. But I have been, this year, particularly reading the signs of the sky and the air and the earth, the birds, the animals. And it began when I was experienced the fire, the LA fire. So some of you don't know, but I live in Pasadena, which is next door to Altadena, which is where one of the fires happened. The other one was in Pacific Palisades. And so my town and Altadena, they call Dinas. The two towns are called Dinas because they both end in Dina, and it's just a neighboring community. So I experienced this fire storm in Los Angeles, the city of angels. And I got to say that when I reflect back to that experience, I wasn't paying close enough attention in the moment to the signs that were right there in front of my face. And, when I had several signs, it was Tuesday, January the 7th, and I was in a cabinet meeting in my conference office, which is on the second floor. And it had windows like on the top of the wall, like these back here. And through the windows, we could see that the storm was whipping up. The trees were swaying wildly. We could actually hear some of the wind. And we continued on with our cabinet meeting, doing important cabinet stuff, and noticing the howling and noticing that it didn't go away. Usually when a storm comes, it comes and then it leaves. It's in California. And but it kept increasing until we got to the end of the day. we were supposed to get out around 5. Around 4, somebody said, hey, I just checked the news. You know how when we're in meetings, we're always doing 3 things at one time with our phones. Somebody checked the news and said, there's a fire. There's a fire in this storm. And so we looked at the news, and we I dismissed the cabinet meeting and told everybody to go home to their hotels and their places where they were staying and to check on their churches and see how we're doing. And so that night, I was alone. Jim was here in Arizona. We still have a house here in Phoenix. And he was here, and I was in my house on the 2nd floor where the bedroom is, trying to sleep. And I didn't know, what to do in a fire in California. I mean, I just, the obvious thing is leave. But it was kind of near us, but not in my neighborhood yet. So I turned on the TV all night long. I watched the news. I had the news on, so I'd sleep, wake up and see the news. But mostly I didn't sleep because the wind was whipping around so loud that it felt like, it was the loudest wind I've ever heard. And that night, I sat there wondering what was going to happen. So 2 towns were affected, Pacific Palisades, which is over on the coast. And Pacific Palisades is a town that was built by Methodists. A group of Methodists from the Chautauqua community went from the east to the west and built up this community. So we want to have a community built around the things of God. And so they just developed a Christian community is how it started. Now doesn't claim that anymore, but that is the way it was born. And in fact, the street signs are all named after bishops and missionaries in the United Methodist Church. So it's really cool. When I went there after the fire, I was geeking out on the signs of the street. I know, I read about that guy. And Altadena, the town close to me, is a community that is Black-owned, started out as a Black-owned town when people couldn't buy houses because they weren't allowed by the loaning industries. So they went to this area close to the mountains. They started building their houses in an unincorporated area, town. And now it's a Black and brown-owned town where people can actually buy houses, which is really difficult in LA because it's very expensive. But people can buy there, and it's a very proud Black, brown-owned town that has a really great sense of community with each other. A famous author that I had just read, Octavia Butler, lived there and wrote her books from there, and then she also is buried there. And I don't know if you've ever read Octavia Butler. I want to recommend her to you, but she writes the scariest stuff I've ever read, and might give you some nightmares. It's dystopian, so it kind of fit what just happened in this town. But it's a picturesque, close-knit town nestled up to the mountains. So 2 towns, 2 rich histories, and in the middle of the night, I was experiencing what was happening. I was paying attention to what was happening to the town closest to me, while also understanding Pacific Palisades was also hit. We had churches in both of these places. So the sound of the wind was so loud that it sounded like a hurricane. I have been in a hurricane, or close to a hurricane before when we lived in Houston. The trees were swaying and dancing in our backyard. The sky was a different color. And in my house, on the 2nd story, suddenly I smelled smoke in my house. And I wondered, is the fire close by? And I kept checking the news. No, it's not close by yet. It's still in this other town. It hasn't come into my neighborhood. And I received texts in the middle of the night from friends who had lost power and asking if I was okay. Do you still have power? I had power most of the time. I didn't sleep, as I said. I slept fitfully when I did sleep with the local news on all night long. And then about 4 o'clock in the morning, my phone started giving me a sign. The sign was, it started yelling at me, like an alert yells at you. It was an alert. And it said, it did the beep, 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 and the all caps words were "Get out now." And it was really early and dark, and I was tired because I didn't sleep all night. And so I was thinking, nah, I mean, I don't have anything packed. Why would I? So anyway, because it kept yelling at me, I went to the front door downstairs, opened the door, looked around. None of my neighbors were leaving. I later found out they had left earlier the day before, but I didn't know. And I just thought, well, maybe this is a California thing. You know, you always have alerts for fires, and you don't pay attention until it's really, really close. And I was watching the news. But I decided, well, maybe I should just pack my car. So I got up. Maybe at 6 o'clock, I got out of bed. I packed my car. Do you know what to take when you have to run? I learned. I had lost a house in a fire when I was in high school. We didn't have a chance to take anything, so I remembered that there was only a few things that I missed. Mostly I missed my pictures, not much else. But so I packed my passport, the books I was reading at that moment, my Bible, my discipline, the quilt my daughter made for me by hand, jeans, t-shirt, second pair of shoes, and my medications, a few toiletries, and that was all I needed. I mean, I know that I was leaving back there some artwork that I would have liked to have had, but I just didn't have the brain space to take stuff off my walls and put it into the car. And artwork, yeah, can't be replaced, but it's a thing. It's just a thing. So about 8 o'clock, I took my dog Chica in her little bag, and we got in the car, and I left the house and I went to the office. As I was leaving my house, there were other signs that I didn't know I hadn't noticed before in the middle of the night. The streets were littered with trees and branches, like tree branches were down in the streets. I'm a person who pays attention to birds. I always hear bird sounds. Is anybody else who listens to the birds on a regular basis? Yeah, I see a few hands. The birds were quiet. I didn't hear the birds. I also didn't hear planes overhead, and I heard another sound, the sound of fire trucks. They were frequent, they were loud, and when I was driving out the street, there was all kinds of fire trucks just parked on the streets from where I was headed to the office. There was all kinds of sights of flashing lights from these emergency vehicles. And then I noticed that it looked like it was snowing, but doesn't snow much in California. And I realized it was ash. It was ashing, ash coming down. And when I arrived at my office, I unloaded my dog and my stuff in my office, and then I went to the church nearby, which is just a couple blocks away, the church that was close. I got out of my car there and noticed that my hair was covered in ash, my skin was kind of whitish, and I had that smell in my nose, smoke smell. The following day when I got up, I saw another sign, and that was the sign of the sun in the sky. It was red. In the morning sun, you could just see it was a red sun with a gray, ashy sky. These were signs that happened in a short period of time. They're blaring signs, they were right in my face, but I was reluctant to pay attention to them, reluctant to leave my house, reluctant to think it was that big of a deal, reluctant to notice the signs that were glaring my way. I even thought that maybe the signs weren't that bad because I had never experienced a fire that close before. I doubted my senses in that moment. So this scripture makes me think about that moment when signs were glaring in my face and I didn't pay attention to them. And I wondered if we as humans are very good at reading signs. And I just in that moment made sure I could get through the day. I wasn't thinking this was a disaster. I wasn't seeing the devastation yet. I mean, I'd canceled cabinet, but the next day I canceled cabinet, said, go take care of your churches. We'll get back to cabinet later. But the thing that came up later when I reflected on it was how even when the signs are staring us right in the face, we have a tendency towards disbelief because we want everything to be normal, whatever normal was for us the day before. It made me wonder, what other signs are we missing in life? Are we alert, for example, to the signs of Christian nationalism and its devastating effect on the witness of Christ in the world? Like, some of us don't want to talk about that in the church, but the church is the place we need to talk about that, because this is our faith. And we need to be able to say about our faith, we are this, but we are not that. We don't worship a person. We don't worship a power or a structure. We worship Jesus. We follow Jesus. We worship God. But if we Christians don't talk about Christian nationalism, seeing the signs and what is done in our communities, the harm that is done to our world, then who will? Well, I can tell you who is. Who is are the non-Christians. And they think all Christians are Christian nationalists because that's all they see and hear on social media. But it's not true. There are many Christians who follow the way of God through Christ, the way of love, who abhor Christian nationalism. I'm one of them. Many of you are too. And if you have been taught or ingrained in the world of Christian nationalism, and you're not aware of the signs of how that's taking us down a road that Christ himself would not agree with, then please do your homework and talk to people and find out what it's all about, because really, there are ways we Christians can diverge from the path that Christ set us on that can set us towards evil, and that's what's happening right now, and that's what the world thinks Christians as a whole are about. So are we alert to the signs of Christian nationalism in our own world? There was a sign this last week of even the evangelical Christian churches, which don't always veer towards Christian nationalism, just have a different upbringing than we did. But I don't know if you followed or your algorithm had this happening, but on my algorithm for social media, all my social media platforms, somebody passed away recently. And he was a person who taught Christians in the evangelical church, taught them that that parents need to spank, abuse, neglect to a certain point, and taught them how and what weapons to use and what not to use. And he taught like abuse of children and said it's okay because it's discipline. There are many ways to discipline our child. There's many ways that we get disciplined. But as a social worker, though I heard some of that, I grew up as an adult saying, no, we have to take care of our children and never abuse them. But he taught it and used language that softened it. He also taught the purity culture so that we learned as women, people in that tradition learned as women, that we belong to men, our fathers, and then our husbands. And nowhere in that space, as healthy sexual beings, did we have our own autonomy. He taught that and called it the purity culture. And he taught that males dominated, females are subjugated in the world, that this is the Christian way. And he died. And there's people all over my social media platforms that were dancing and celebrating his death because they had been harmed by him through their parents. And I thought it was just a few, and then over the last few days, I've watched it. It's a lot of people celebrating someone's death. And I wanted to say to us Christians that we have to be careful what we teach and preach and live how we live. And we have to live in such a way that nobody dances at our passing on our grave. That people know that we stood for love. And we figured out what that means in our society, in our day. We figured out what that means. There are signs in the earth that are showing us that something is changing. Yeah, you can blame it on whatever you want. It doesn't matter to me how you say what you say is the reason for climate change. But climate change is real. I can tell you, living through, this is the third fire. When I first came as a bishop to the area that I'm at, I cover Central California to the Southern California border, the Hawaii and Pacific Islands, Guam and Saipan. So when I first came, we had 2 years ago, the fire on Maui. Remember that one in Lahaina? We lost a church, and a community there lost a lot of people. And then these 2 fires. And I can tell you just from that, just that alone, that the world is changing. The earth is groaning. The earth is trying to, I think, help us humans be better at living with the earth, because we've kind of gotten out of whack. So I think it's a sign that the earth is giving us. And it's a chance for us to make some changes and to demand changes for those who make policies, but also to make changes on our own, on how we live with the earth, how we support the earth and care for the earth as God asked us to in Genesis. We can make that political if we want. Or we can just say, in Genesis, God said to us, after we were created as humans, there's the earth, care for it. And go back to that. Care for the earth in all the ways that we can, so that our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren have a beautiful place to live on this planet. There are signs. There are signs that we have done harm because of racism, and that's been going on probably since our country was born in this land. I'm sure it's been going on longer than that, but from our roots in the United States, it's been part of our inception story. So racism might be something that you think to yourself because of the day we live in. That I'm not racist, and we don't experience racism here. But as a person who's half and half Mexican, half white, I can tell you racism is out there. I get the comments all the way, all around. If you know brown and black people, ask them about racism. If we want to remove the sin of racism from our country, we need to pay attention to the signs of hatred that are going on around us. You know all the people that have died because they were the wrong color when they were picked up by a police officer or pulled over. I got a call just a week ago from a African-American black young man who is a lay leader in my conference, one of the mini laity in my conference, and he said, I just got pulled over, and they were about to arrest me, and I said, why? What? He goes, nothing. I had done nothing wrong. But he was now traumatized. Now he couldn't trust our system. Racism is happening, whether we want to look at it or not. But do we notice how the people who are carted into prisons are mostly brown and black? Do we notice how we make money off of them through the industrial prison complexes? Do we notice that we are even sending people of color to concentration camps in other countries because we don't want to deal with them in our own concentration camps? Do you notice? And we don't like those words, right? But it's all about racism. And sometimes we just need to open our eyes and look at the signs that are happening around us, are screaming at us. Don't look away. It's okay to hurt for a little while. It's okay to experience the pain. And right now, of course, in my area, I'm sure it's happening here too in Phoenix, but we have whole families who have sought refuge in our country legally. When you cross the border, you are an asylee, and you go through a process. And then they go through to the court hearing, and they're being taken away after the court gives them permission to stay longer. Then they come outside, and ICE agents are removing them in LA, and also in LA, including the town I live in, the agents are coming and just snapping people off the street. Do you notice that sign? I mean, I know you've heard it in the news, but has it been something you've been willing to look at? Have we noticed the signs of genocide and of civilian and military folk dying en masse through the wars in Ukraine, in Gaza, and in Congo? Do we turn a blind eye because we can't manage what we see? It's too much. Can't live that way. But masses of children being starved and then dying, and their families dying by bombs, fleeing their homes to save their lives. And then I want to go a little lighter. Have you noticed the signs that are happening in the churches post-COVID? Have you noticed that COVID did something in the world of the church? It did something not just in the world of the church, but in our whole world. But if you look at just the church post-COVID, we had to figure out what we were about, why we were doing what we were doing, how to do what we are doing, and why it mattered. We had to learn how to be relevant and not irrelevant to the world, because we saw many people didn't come back because we were irrelevant in many places. One of the things I love about this community is when you do the offering. And this morning, when the offering statement was read, it's the why. We're not here for ourselves. We're here for the other. We're here for justice and mercy and compassion, and that means everybody. And this church, this community here, is bold enough to say that out loud. But there are many communities that will not say that because they don't want to get anybody's feelings hurt. So they say nada, zero. And so a person who's been dealing with, say, racism this week will go into this church and see that they're the only person of color in this community, and they don't see any statement that looks like them or addresses them or addresses racism and inclusion, and they don't like, why would they come back? So please continue to do what you're doing right in this moment. It matters because there are many people who need it. Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit personal now on the signs. Have you noticed the signs of people around you that might be in trouble? Somebody's drinking too much, somebody's talking too little, isn't being heard. Somebody that you love is getting farther and farther away from you. Have you noticed the signs of lack of health or even new health? Have you noticed the signs that may be saying to yourself, you need a break, girl. You need a new start? Signs that maybe there's trouble in your personal relationship? Have you noticed those signs? What signs, what personal signs, what church signs, what world signs are we ignoring that are staring us right in the face? The scripture said, Jesus said it this way, hey there, you're good at reading the signs of the weather, but really you ain't too good reading the signs of the times. So in church, when a congregation isn't worshiping through the music, or you can't hear singing or talking or welcoming of each other, that's a sign that something's not right. When a church spends so much time fighting over the things, their stuff, and not paying attention to the world outside of them, fighting within and not serving without, that's a sign. When you go around churches and the literal signs read, do not do whatever, that's a sign that we don't want to have in our churches. When the youngest member of the church is in their 60s, glad to see that's not happening here, we're multi-age. When the congregational ethnic, economic, and age categories do not match the same in the community, that's a sign. When the church stays silent in the face of evil, that's a sign. when the church stays silent, when there's governmental kidnappings, detainings, and deportings to countries that run concentration camps, there's racial silencing by redistricting voting maps, when the church stays silent in the face of great harm and pain all around our world, not noticing, when the church doesn't notice that there are other countries in the world and other pains to consider. So I think our church has a really important role right now. Like, this is our time. If we could just ever point to a moment in history in our lifespan where the church really needed to be the church, this is it. I know everybody says that, but this is really it. Things are really happening in our world that we as a church need to pay attention to. There's lack of morals and even civility in our governmental leaders. What's with that? Like, would you want to talk to your kids that way? When Christians are seen as repulsive to the world, that's when the church needs to stand up and say, no, this is the way of Christianity. When the church can address the warming and the changing of the earth's climate, and also just caring for the earth. This is our time. This is something we can do. When we see hopelessness in teens and in children, this is our time. When we look at our world and we see that we develop monuments to heroes of war, and we have lack of monuments to heroes and sheroes of justice and peace in our federal places, this is our time. When we rely on technology over relationship, this is our time to do something. When we see isolation is prevalent among our people, this is our time to stand up and to do something. Now, in case you're feeling overwhelmed, which I do just preaching this message, you can't do everything. You can't address all the problems of the world. You can be aware of all of them so that you can do no harm. But you can choose one or two things and say, I'm going to put my time and energy, my extra time and energy to this and this. Because I know these things, or I have passion for these things. I will go in this direction while I understand my friends and other people in the world will address the other things. Because of overwhelm, we sometimes just shut down. Don't do that. Take your breaks from the news and preachers like me. And instead, get your rest and then go back in to the one or two things that you can do. Maybe you can write letters to your governmental leaders. Maybe you can show up at town halls. Maybe you're the one who can march the streets because you have time now. I think it's been fun for me to watch the boomers, my generation, who've retired, showing up at all these marchings and protests because they have time, and because, if you don't know anything about the boomers, we grew up in protest. 60s and 70s, we got this. Y'all go work, we got this. If you're in that category, do that. It's kind of fun to march if you have time. Do the one thing that you can do. Maybe it's learning more about the earth and about earth care and how we can be better engaged and better responsibility, have more responsibility in caring for the earth. Maybe you know that, and you can teach a few people. There's other signs I've been seeing. One is that I need you to hear about these other signs. During the fire, there was an outpouring of love that flowed down from people all in LA. Los Angeles folks came to the two towns. What do you need? We got you covered. They brought water. They brought anything we needed. They came. Outpourings of love were just amazing. And as instant, the streets were covered with people who came to help. And all around the world, people sent money to help us rebuild. That also is a sign of the time, a sign that there's hope and help in humanity. One staff member of mine lost her home. She was given another house to live in till the time that she could find a space. Just somebody had just opened it up. A family member of 10 was dropped off at that church member that I went to in the beginning of the story. On the day of the fire, that church opened up its doors, and it's old church, and they had all these Sunday school rooms, and the Sunday school rooms were filled with evacuees who came down with their animals. The one family was a family of 10. They took a Sunday school room. They also had birds, cats, and dogs. And that's what the church was for a couple of weeks, kind of hostile. Semi-trucks flowed in with supplies, masks, water, all the things that we needed. UMCOR showed up. Another bishop came over and brought us, at that church that we were serving so many people, brought us lasagna, best lasagna I've ever tasted. Pans and pans of it made by his folk. And a Lutheran bishop who lost her home in Altadena opened up her church that was still up, open, still survived the fire, for one of our churches to stay in for a while. Prayer services, outpouring of love. That's also a sign. Remember that sign when you see all the other signs. Remember that we are not incompetent, and we are not helpless, and we are not hopeless. These are the signs these are the times we live in. The signs are glaring at us, yelling at us, but now we have work to do, right? We have love to spread. We have a gospel message to shout about. We have changes to attend to. We have a world that is sending us signs and asking us to pay attention. And I believe we will, because deep down, God made us as people who love each other. So because of that sign, I believe we will, and we can, and we are not hopeless. We are filled with God's love for each other, and that love for each other is what will rise up in times of trouble, like this time of trouble. So take notice, people of God. The signs of the times are right before our very eyes. Amen.